Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Everybody, good morning. Today is Friday, June 17th, 2023. We are here for a special edition of Freestyle Fridays here on a Friday morning after a very interesting week. I'm really not going to get into a lot of the thank yous and whatnot from yesterday because our Congresswoman is with us this morning. She is, I think, rightfully so, kicking off a very interesting morning. We have this week, I literally have interviewed, or by the 10 o'clock, I will have interviewed the top 4 elected women in the state of Massachusetts. We had the Attorney General this week at the Health Equity Compact Summit. We're kicking off this morning with our Congresswoman, my friend, my sister, advocate, righteous, indignant when it comes to justice, a sister coming in now. And then Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll at 9 a.m. and then Governor Maura Healey at 9:30 a.m. So I have half a cup of coffee here, so hopefully we'll be able to get through it. Do me a favor, as we're not usually on Fridays, please hit that share button, invite others in, because our Congresswoman is sharing a lot of the information about what she's working on. There's a lot that's went on with the cancel student debt, and now along with, or not now, but adding to some criminal justice reform. But we're going to check in on her, how she's doing, and then the things that she's working on in DC for us. So I am honored always. She is not a stranger. She is part of the Java fam. To introduce to some and present to others, our Congresswoman, our beautiful, just wonderful Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley. Good morning, sister.
Good morning, brother.
How are you?
To you on this latest iteration and new and exciting chapter on Java with Jimmy. As I was reflecting, technically, when it comes to this platform, you're just becoming a toddler. You're only a little over 2 years old. I think that's right.
It's just about 3, but yes, ma'am.
You're 3, but you are definitely in the 99th percentile. I think you skipped walking and you went right to running.
Wow.
Congratulations. And again, thank you for this platform and this opportunity, which certainly is no one-off. But appreciate the opportunity to engage and inform.
Absolutely. AP, as I always do, folks like yourself are advocating and moving along with the work. And then I'm also aware that within the family, there have been transitions of family members moving on. And so I have to check in on you with all due is Ayanna, the mother, the wife, the advocate. Yes. But how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I just really aim to center gratitude in all things. It has been a season of layered loss in our family. We're certainly not alone in that. And, I just want to speak a word of encouragement and life and healing into all listening today. People are carrying holes that are just too big to fill. And as I've said many times before, whenever you meet someone, everyone is walking around with these sort of tiny fractures. And your engagement, you get to decide if you want that to be an engagement that contributes to those fractures, resulting in hard breaks, or that puts them on a pathway to healing. So be kind. And also stop rescheduling your joy, as the statementee says. Make that a practice. And, in the month of June, it's marked with significance for so many reasons. Pride, Juneteenth, Men's Health Month, Father's Day, and of course, given the roster of women that you've had, thank you for proving that women's history is every day, and not only just during the month of March. So I'm feeling encouraged and resolved. And then finally, I'll just share, because I think it is relevant to some of what we'll get into today. I had the great honor last night. I was asked to recreate in my own voice, if you will, Dr. King's final Sunday sermon, where he delivered it at the Washington National Cathedral. That sermon was called "Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution." And so I had the great honor and responsibility of trying to steward that message and to reimagine it in 2023.
Oh my.
And it was a great honor, but also incredibly fortifying to revisit that sermon. And, I think I can get into it a little bit more as we talk about some policy, but it is just, he was prophetic. Yeah. And, if you think about in 1968, this being his final Sunday sermon, remaining awake during a great revolution. And in 2023, we see these draconian forces at work that seek to weaponize wokeism, that want to lull us into a permanent sleep state with their false truths, their hate, their fear mongering, their policy violence. And so these things are cyclical.
Yeah.
These things are cyclical. And I want to shout out, I know you'll appreciate this, in that you have stewarded and led a choir. Yes. There was a beautiful choir that sang at the Washington National Cathedral before I spoke, called Dream Launchers. Mm. And I had not heard that song in such a long time, "Someday We'll All Be Free." Mm. And so again, I think, I'm talking about "Take It From Me." Yes,
come on. I didn't recognize it. I need just a few more words.
Yeah, stop it. You know it. I'm not gonna do it. I can't hit a, it's allergy season. I can't even get to that. But anyway, so speaking of "Someday We'll All Be Free."
Yes, ma'am.
Some policy stuff, because to me, that's how we get there.
Well, one of the things, and I just thought about this in real time, and I have to ask this in my authentic self. You knew of some of the things to which you referred a few minutes ago around the cyclical things that are put intentionally in place to limit us. Mm-hmm. How much from the transition of a city council to a congresswoman has that become more real to you? Because there's a different cadence when you talk about it now. And I just had that thought, like, being in that where you are now in DC, like, mm-hmm. How much has that really been clarified for you?
Well, look, whenever I need to be fortified and I'm in need of clarity, I always look back and take stock of our past. I look to the blueprint of those who came before me when I need clarity and direction. And so in doing that, it has just reaffirmed for me that the path to justice is nonlinear, that Coretta Scott King had it right when she said freedom is won or earned in every generation, because ostensibly gains are not guaranteed every time there is progress. I mean, when you see this super majority that I'm proud to be a part of, that you and your listeners are a part of, this super majority, where there's a shift that's occurring. I don't think we're in a racial reckoning, but I think there's a power shift, a culture shift led by this super majority of the most marginalized. And so what we're in the midst of right now is backlash, is white lash, is attempts to turn back the hands of time, to roll back and to undermine gains that have been made in civil rights and human rights. Pardon me.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've been here before, and instead of that discouraging me,
Yep.
um, it anchors me because I know this is just simply the work of justice.
Okay.
And
Yep.
so it's, and I always knew, excuse me, I always knew that federal policy had been the contributor, had, sort of this trickle down legislated oppression and marginalization, very precisely for Black Americans and other marginalized people, really began with federal policy.
Mm.
What you see that shows up, that manifests on the municipal and state level, it starts federal. So, if you really want to do radical work in the definition of Angela Y. Davis, it means to get to the root. And so to get to the root, to me, is federal policy.
Well, let's jump right in on something that you're working on, because I just had this thought. You and Senator Marvin worked on canceling student debt, but there's so much intersectionality in the roots of structural racism and whatnot are all intertwined. And so one of those key major things is how we address criminal justice reform and allow people to, if they've made mistakes, to, pay their back, quote unquote, debt to society and things like that. But there's still things in place that limit us. And so what is it that you're working on now to change that? And also, I know you're working on some housing stuff in relation to that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so first, I just think, again, as we are heading into a season of Juneteenth, Freedom Day, I mean, I remain squarely focused on the work of full freedom and liberation for Black people every day. But as we enter into this Juneteenth season, I'm reintroducing the People's Justice Guarantee. And it's called the People's Justice Guarantee because it was developed cooperatively with the people closest to the pain. Because when it comes to criminal legal reform, and including folks behind the wall, I did congressional hearings behind the wall and focus groups and things like that. So the working with impacted families, working with folks behind the wall, working with activists and advocates, we have developed this radical reimagining of our criminal legal system, one which centers the humanity and dignity of people. It's comprehensive, it's decarceration focused, and it's trauma informed. And it really outlines a fair, equitable, and just legal system. And so this is a reintroduction, which is very common in a legislative process. As you continue to reintroduce a bill, you gain more co-sponsors, and that helps you to get the heft and the leverage that you need to get it to the committee of jurisdiction, hopefully marked up, and then to the floor for a vote. And so, but I wanted a People's Justice Guarantee because I felt we needed, and the people felt we needed, a new North Star. And so I wanted something, again, comprehensive, decarceration focused, trauma informed, that was crafted with the people. So I used that framework, that new North Star of the People's Justice Guarantee, to introduce legislation like counseling, not criminalization, the End Pushout Act, my federal bill to abolish the death penalty. So it's been this umbrella piece of organization where all of my other criminal legal reform work has sat under that. And so now we're adding to this People's Justice Guarantee, within that framework, that new North Star, housing first. And this is legislation, again, that was crafted in cooperation with those closest to the pain. And I want to give you the acronym. So housing first, that acronym is Housing for Formerly Incarcerated Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. So that's what the first stands for. Okay, Housing for Formerly Incarcerated Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. And I introduced this legislation with Representative Rashida Tlaib. And this actually is work that started for me. One of my favorite things about working on the federal level now is when I can pull that thread of something I started on the municipal level in the micro, then now I get to address at the root in the macro. And I remember in my time on the council learning that 30% of those being released from correctional facilities were being released to shelters, to homeless shelters. which is very disingenuous if you're serious about people legitimately getting back on the grid after they've paid their debt to society and making a positive contribution. They need housing first. And so the fact of the matter is that because of policies within housing authorities, because of discrimination from landlords, those with criminal histories often struggle to access safe and stable housing. And they're limited by the inclusion of criminal history on tenant background checks. And so, just to share some numbers on this, landlords refusing to rent to folks with a criminal record impacts nearly 1 in 3 adults in America, with Black and brown folks having the highest rates of housing denials, and formerly incarcerated people are 10 times more likely to be homeless. And so this is what our Housing First Act seeks to confront and to change.
That's one of the things, not only for those that are formerly incarcerated, coming out of incarceration in general, housing is needed. And I like one of the things that you said, you're centering the approach to equity in the criminal justice system around humanity. And I think that being the lens, it takes away race, it takes away ethnicity, and that being the lens to push it through. Hopefully it will be guaranteed. Earlier on, you said that nothing is guaranteed. So I'm hearing that there's some intentionality, even in that you said a few minutes ago before we went live, words matter. And so will this keep sort of a guarantee once we get it across, once the bill passes?
Well, first, if you care about people who have been incarcerated, your loved ones, neighbors, community members, once they've paid their debt, if you care about their successful re-entry, if you care about their successful reintegration, which to me is everything from family stabilization and real job opportunities and breaking the cycle of recidivism, housing is fundamental to that. So it's true, many of the social and racial justice and civil rights gains that we've made are not guaranteed because we see them being undermined and attacked every day. But that is because of our growing supermajority of power. And so we're in the midst of a moment of white supremacist backlash.
Yep.
And so that backlash is leading with an attempt to roll back. But I have to keep legislating, I have to keep organizing, I have to keep mobilizing, because I can't just do that when the Democrats are in the majority in the House. One of the things that Dr. King spoke about in that sermon about staying awake in the midst of a great revolution, gosh, I lost the point that I wanted to get to there. But
that happens to preachers sometimes.
That does happen. And the thing is that the text is so rich, but there was a point that I wanted to make there. It'll come back to me. But the point is I have to remain vigilant. And I can't wait until Democrats are back in the majority. I have to continue to do this work. Oh, this is what it was. What Dr. King said is that he was not a consensus seeker. He was a consensus builder. Okay? So when he was being criticized for his stance against the Vietnam War, when he gave this final Sunday sermon, he was one of the most unpopular people in America, very unpopular. And so people had come to him, like the Southern Poverty Law Center and other partners and allies, and said, you're alienating and upsetting a lot of people. You're losing a lot of friends. And he said, that's okay. I'm not a consensus seeker. I'm a consensus builder. And so one of the ways that I seek to build consensus, to stoke consciousness, is to continue to organize, continue to agitate, continue to legislate on the issues of consequence. And again, with this North Star of the People's Justice Guarantee and the reintroduction of this, I'm like, lately I have enjoyed being called a representative instead of a congresswoman, because what great honor to be a representative of the people to Washington with a mandate. And so, I'm like the 1 in 4 children in the Massachusetts 7th who have an incarcerated parent, loved one, or caregiver. In the country, 1 out of 28 children in our country have an incarcerated parent, loved one, or caregiver. So I'm here to be a representative and to be a consensus builder, and a justice seeker.
I'll ask this. You kind of touched on it based on what you talked about that you're doing in DC. It just often baffles me, Representative Presley. You have to, wonderful cup there, that you have to build consensus around things that you just would believe the humanity in people would just allow them to go ahead and vote, do what it is they need to do to level the playing field on equity. It makes no sense that we're still have to build consensus around things that are no-brainer for improved quality of life.
Well, or just for basic human rights. And at the end of the day, so much of what we're talking about with racial justice, civil rights, when you boil it all down, you're really just talking about human rights.
Yes.
You think access to safe and stable housing, to accessible, quality, affordable health care, to air that is breathable and water that is drinkable. These things should be fundamental human rights. But again, I find comfort and instruction and prescription in the past, because remember, in the midst of all the marches and the boycotts, that when Dr. King and others with him, architects of this movement, met with President Johnson, and they were trying to pass the Civil Rights Act, and then later the Voting Rights Act, he said, "Make me do it." And so I always go back to that, which is that government has shown us time and time again that more often than not, it does not lead, it responds. And so, I'm not standing alone. Right. I am the manifestation of not only our ancestors' wildest dreams, but a representative of a broader movement, and a movement that wants to dramatically reduce jail and prison populations, that wants to change the experience of confinement for those who are there, that wants to eliminate wealth-based discrimination and corporate profiteering, that wants to invest in impacted communities, that wants to bring folks home. And I do want to take a note, given that you have Lieutenant Governor Driscoll and Governor Healy joining you momentarily, and I'm sure they'll talk about this. But look, who you vote for determines who's elected. Who's elected determines the policies, and the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives. And so I do want to thank my partner in the corporate office. It's good to have a Democrat there, Maura Healy, for the pardons that just came out yesterday. And one of those, Terrence Williams, is someone that we certainly fought for. And I just want to commend the Healy Driscoll administration. It is very rare for a governor this early in their tenure to do pardons. And so, again, who you vote for determines who's elected determines the policies, and the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives. And so that's why we are reintroducing the People's Justice Guarantee, this North Star, this radical reimagining of our criminal legal system that is trauma-informed, comprehensive, and decarceration focused, and was crafted in partnership with the people. And I'm excited that now this Housing First legislation to combat the housing discrimination that those coming out of our correctional facilities experience. Because if you want to break the cycles of recidivism, you have to support people in their successful reintegration and reentry. And that begins with housing. Jimmy, one other thing, I never know what I want to call you, Jimmy, James. Yes. I'll just say, brother, just 3 quick things I want to say before our time leaves. One, happy Father's Day.
Thank you so much.
To you, to every man who's playing that that paternal role in a child's life, whether you're doing it as an uncle, as a dad, as a grandfather, a caregiver, whatever. And I do just want to lift up and affirm that Black dads matter.
So much so.
And I want to take a moment just to give my own quick testimony, and that I just, I'm so grateful for second chances and grace, and mercy and redemption. Many of you know my father was incarcerated for most of my life, and so we did not have a relationship. And 9 years ago, he walked me down the aisle to marry the love of my life. And he and my husband enjoy a very close relationship. You all hear me talk so much about my mother, Sandy, but I just wanted to lift up my brilliant, loving, handsome, he would definitely want me to say that, father, Martin, who upon re-entering into society, went on to teach on the college level. He was a professor of journalism and became a published author. And I'm very proud of him. But most of all, I'm just grateful for our second chance. And, just want folks to know it is possible. I did also want to lift up that on June 25th, you can go to my platforms to get the information. From 3 to 5, I'll be hosting my second annual Black Boy Joy Cookout.
Yes.
You can go to my platforms and you can learn more about that. And yes, that's not just for young men and boys. This is for Black men.
Yes.
Because we want you to center your Black boy joy. And so I want to just make folks aware of that. And that is under an initiative that I'm doing that is being stewarded by the Davis system, because they hold all those things that are my heart's work. And this is a part of my broader work in Ayana for Black men. And so I wanted to just take a moment to lift up the two Black men that I love most, my father, Martin Terrell, and my husband, Conan Harris. So happy Father's Day, everyone.
I appreciate it, Congresswoman. I'll just share with you, I don't know if you picked up a notice, but you're not the only one that's entrusted themselves to the Davis system. They have now stepped in, and Anthony and Aaron and the whole team there are trying to help me get my life together so I can mature from the toddler into, the teenager.
Yeah, that's right.
Java Cafe. So, Congresswoman, I definitely appreciate you. I put the link in there, long folks, but you can go and click that. Share that information with your kings, your princes, and have them come out and be a part. And speaking of cookouts, Congresswoman Presley, I don't know if you noticed, but there was an incident at Carson Beach last year with some young people that looked like us. There was a incident there, and then law enforcement's response was interesting to our Black and brown.
Well, there's a long history at that beach.
Well, listen, we're going Java with Jimmy is going to Carson Beach on June 21st, and we're having a full-blown cookout on Carson Beach on June 21st. And so we're taking over that space with the coalition, Boston Waterfronts Coalition. And so I heard you talk about the cookout a few days after that. And so I know you would appreciate that, just naming that history there, that we're going back and being intentional about inviting all and the diversity and inclusiveness that's needed on Boston's waterfront. So AP, I know your time is short. I want to stay in good with the team so I don't get in trouble.
No, you got a heavy roster. So, but I appreciate you. Happy Father's Day, family. Happy Juneteenth, Freedom Day. Stay awake, y'all, and someday we'll all be free.
Absolutely. Congresswoman and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, I don't know if you got to hear Lieutenant Governor, but our Congresswoman, she got out of there that quick. Okay. She
gone.
So, all right. Just with your response right there, I'm sitting here wondering how this is going to go, because when we interacted at the Icon Awards ceremony, I was like, Lieutenant Governor has some swag and some fun with her. And so first of all, let me do the formal piece. Everyone, we are here with the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, part of this wonderful just roster of the top elected women here in the state of Massachusetts. I had the pleasure of meeting her about a month and a half ago at an event where our friend Quincy Roberts was awarded an Icon Award for his work within the LGBTQ plus community. And so I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder how this is going to go today. So Lieutenant Governor, let me first ask you, as I do with the governor and the mayor and whatnot, you are in a position where you have the responsibility of looking out for the well-being for the entire constituency of the state of Massachusetts, supporting the governor in many ways. You are the person in the worst case scenario. If anything happens to the governor, you are the person in charge. I have to check in with you on from a mental health status, like with all due respect, how is Kim?
It's Friday. The sun is shining. I feel a great deal of privilege and honor to be in this role. And having been a local leader for a number of years as the mayor of Salem, I feel gratitude. Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm pumped to be with you this morning.
I am so excited to have you here. What is it that, there's a couple, Congresswoman Presley talked about, let's maybe jump right in on a couple of things. Congresswoman Presley talked about something this administration is doing that is very atypical with the pardoning of what Governor Healy just issued yesterday. Can you give us just some of the context of did she sit down with you and say, hey, I'm presuming she calls you Kim. Hey,
yep.
Kim, this is what I'm thinking. I know they haven't done it before. Would you give me your thoughts? Like, what was the philosophy for her coming out so early to do something like this?
I think it's really consistent with our values. Like, we believe in redemption. We think there's an opportunity when you have such a strong case. These individuals really, I think wrote their stories, right? Wrote their story in terms of why they were, why making this space for them with these pardons, the meaningful impact it would have on their lives going forward, and the amazing work they've done. They have life stories that I think are compelling, and so. I think we were really grateful to be in a position to undertake this role. They had been recommended for pardons like months ago. And that's so hard. Think about it. You went through the gauntlet, so to speak, of getting there. And then, it just didn't happen. So
yep. I appreciate that. And let's jump into some more policy things. One of the things that the Congresswoman talked about and this administration moves on, the mayor locally, my mayor in Boston moves on, is the fact that housing is such an important issue for those that are coming out. Presumably, the legislation that the Congresswoman is working on is sort of dismantling any, let's say these folks were trying to get housing, and this thing that they're being pardoned for is on their record. And so I just wanted to correlate that and also ask you to speak to, I believe that you all have prioritized housing in a manner that there's a new secretariat in that.
You got it, Jimmy. Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us about the, I'm not exactly sure who it is. I just kind of have heard, but tell us, how are you prioritizing housing in relationship to what we just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, two things. One, every community we're in, whether it's in, Western Mass, in the South Coast, in Greater Boston, the number one issue we hear about from constituents is housing, the high cost of housing, the unavailability of housing. For folks who want to purchase a house, there is an inventory, folks who are doing quite well, individuals who are feeling like they're working 2 or 3 jobs and cannot afford to live in a community they may have grown up in, seniors who are trying to age in place and are really feeling the pressure of, rising rents if they don't own or rising taxes if they do. And a lot of that has to do with just not having enough housing. So one of our first acts as a new administration was to create a new cabinet secretariat known as Housing and Livable Communities that will focus accelerating the pace of housing in Massachusetts and making sure that the housing that we're building and growing meets community needs. Right now, there are 200,000 housing units short in terms of what we need as a Commonwealth.
Across the whole state?
Yep. And we know that over half the renters in the Commonwealth are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing, which means you're housing insecure. And that honestly doesn't come as a surprise to people, right? There's a lot of folks, if you ask them, could you afford the house you live in now that you bought 30 or 40 years ago? Like the answer is no.
Yes.
And much of that is tied to not having enough housing. So it's like basic supply and demand. There's high demand and not enough supply, prices go up. So we know we need to accelerate the pace, but we also want to make sure we're focused on the type of housing that gets built because market forces control a lot of what gets built.
I was just, let's go there, because I was getting ready to jump in with sort of the piece of affordable housing. There's this piece of affordable for whom and who sets what's affordable. So let's go there as far as the types of housing, either if you're going to talk about environmental or types where there is availability for low income.
So true, Jimmy. And when you have the tight housing market, it puts pressure on everyone. And so looking at how do we shape housing, like no governor controls the real estate market, no mayor controls the market, but how do we shape it? And using things like leveraging state land. If we own the land, part of the reason housing's expensive is because the dirt's so expensive. So we're really putting together an inventory of state land that we can rebuild and make sure housing's more affordable. How do we think about home ownership? We know there are big gaps between families of color who don't own. The major way most of us develop wealth in our families is through housing.
Housing and home ownership. And that's one of the things that we've talked about on the Black Men and Boys Commission, because some of the legislation, and I don't know if it's local or on a state level, but even some of the benefits of being a first-time home buyer, there's certain stipulations in there that don't allow folks to, quote unquote, to keep it very simple, I know you'll appreciate this, to flip it some years later and gain more wealth. And so is the state looking at how those sort of benefits are regulated to where people don't feel trapped on the back end?
Very much so. With our partners at Mass Housing, those are deed restrictions that mean you have to maintain affordability. And look, if somebody got a house at a more affordable level and then flips it 5 years later, that's not great. But after you've owned it for a number of years, you should be able to gain some of that equity like anybody else would. So we think there's a space there to move in that would make sense. But we have to really work at the local level to make sure people are embracing new housing. One of the reasons housing doesn't get built, or so many communities say no to housing, and that through zoning, which is very restrictive and has a really checkered past as to how zoning was even created. So we think there's work to do to educate, to provide technical assistance, and to make sure we're supporting the growth of housing and the housing that we need, supportive housing for folks who are vulnerable in our communities, or seniors who, nobody as a senior says, I can't wait to go to the nursing home, right? We want to keep people in community with wraparound services and make sure we have the type of housing we need. And that's like an all of us effort to educate folks. The governor and I will be like running a campaign for more housing and more affordable housing, and working closely with stakeholders who build housing to get them the tools and resources. AKA
the developers.
Which
is interesting. And I got to be honest, because I have developer friends, and I just wanted to mention that sometimes in the space of affordable housing, you mentioned the word developer, and it's almost to some like a cuss word. But there are some developers that are willing to work, not just to do the bare minimum to get their tax breaks and whatnot, but that there are some that are dedicated to real affordable housing. And so when you mentioned that about working with that community, it's definitely good that there's intentionality there, because often they seem to be able to have the stronghold around that expensive dirt, as you so eloquently. And so one of the things when we talk about housing, Lieutenant Governor, a few months ago, one of our states did a very interesting thing as far as sending some immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. And we're talking about housing. And I just have that thought to talk about, because I see this administration moving a little bit differently in responding to this. And so let's talk a little bit about how the administration, you can start off maybe by how you're supporting them with housing or temporary, but what is the administration's approach to equity when it comes to those that feel they have to leave their countries and come here, or some come and get sent here lately by these other interesting states that just aren't being treated fairly? What is the administration's approach for equity for immigrants?
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we are seeing a surge of newcomers into Massachusetts from places that are just, horrific circumstances, whether it's economic, breakdowns in places. They are coming here because they think they have a better shot for their family. And as the daughter, I'm a first generation, right? My mom's from Trinidad, and like so grateful to be in this country. I remember her.
Excuse me for 1 second. Your mom's from Trinidad?
Yeah, she was born in Grenada and grew up in Trinidad. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what kuchla is?
No.
It's a Trinidadian. We'll talk. I'll make sure you get a jar.
Wait, is it food? Is that what it is?
It's food. It's this, and you've probably had it and just just don't know what it is, but it's cuchala. It's the spicy thing. Every time I hear Trinidad, I think of that spice. So
I don't know that. I love rotis. I go to JP
Yes.
Roti and the pepper sauce and
have you had doubles?
Yes.
So cuchala's on the doubles.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. Let's.
All right. We digress. Yes.
Okay. Right.
But look, I say that because I think we're a country of immigrants. Massachusetts for 400 years has welcomed immigrants. And we have a federal government where immigration is broken. We have people just arriving. It's not orderly. And as a Commonwealth, we've had to step up. We are a right to shelter state, the only right to shelter state in Massachusetts. And that means we have a responsibility to make sure families are housed. We don't want families sleeping on sidewalks. And I will also say it is not easy when you have we have a housing crunch in Massachusetts to try and meet all of these needs. And so we are working across 66 communities, over 5,500 scattered shelter sites with providers to make sure that we're trying to meet basic needs of people who have come here seeking shelter and consistent with the law. And also, I will say it is a high bar at times. We've been working, we have folks showing up at hospital, whole families that need a place to stay. And so we're working hard to try and meet those needs, working with community leaders, immigrant advocate groups. This is an all hands on deck moment when you have such a surge happening. And we're, trying to do, I would say, the best we can to ensure that we're meeting our values as a Commonwealth and addressing the needs of people who are coming to our door seeking, shelter and assistance.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Governor, I wanted to get your perspective as well as I'll get the governor's as well. When you talk about coming to our doors here in Boston, a doorway that has proved to be very interesting for those that are dealing with substance use and for those that live in the area of this concentrated area that has happened over years, pre your administration, pre the prior administration. And so when you talk about housing, one of the things that has come up, or one of the other areas where housing has come up, is around dealing with mass and CAS. Yeah. And there have been more, probably the past administration, but can I ask from your perspective, how is the administration working with local municipalities, specifically in Boston, because it is concentrated here? How is the administration approaching ensuring that those that are dealing with substance use, that have housing issues that are a big part of it? What is the administration's approach in working with municipalities to sort of try to come up with a strategy that looks at the humanity of people, understands that sometimes there's criminal activity, while also considering the impact of this in the neighborhood? I know that's a loaded question, but I also know that you're very well apt to speak to it.
Jimmy, these are such tough challenges because these are people, right? They're somebody's neighbor, somebody's son, somebody's mom, and everyone wants to be helpful. And it's a tough situation. We know from research that the housing first model works. If you can get a roof over, an individual's head, provide those supportive services, we have the best chance of having a sustainable housing environment, helping people with recovery or other mental health challenges, often physical and trauma, challenges that individuals bring who are on mass and CAS or find themselves in those circumstances. But it's really, really challenging. I know that we have strong relationships between the state and the city of Boston trying to, address this issue. We've got some of the best providers in the country, trying to do this work. And it is hard work. People slip. Folks in recovery don't always make it out the first time, right? And so, it's a combination of our healthcare system and our housing system and our mental health system. So trying to provide the supports as needed, work in concert on the ground with local officials and the amazing group of providers who are going out there literally saving lives. I worked in my community in Salem with Healthy Streets. We wanted to make sure we had opportunities to connect with people, build trust on the ground, meet them where they're at, and push in services and hopefully get a roof over their head. And it is really challenging trying to do that in a time when we don't have enough housing for, everyone in the Commonwealth. And so the work will continue. I think we're trying to approach this in concert with the city and with other cities too. Boston's not the only one. That's the place we talk about, but just about every gateway city has had an uptick in a chronic homeless population. So, low barrier for access day centers, building that trust and pushing in services, including housing as you can, are key. And I know there's 2 projects in Boston that we're working, we track closely in other communities who are building supportive housing models. These are, single room occupancy, smaller units that have wraparound services on site that can provide people the best chance at, meeting them where their needs are. And we hope more of those can be, put together with providers and nonprofit developers to assist with Mass and Cass in Boston and other areas.
Absolutely. One of the things, if I could, while I have you, is just, and I've kind of fussed about it before, but in understanding it is such a, and I don't mean to make light when I say multifaceted, it is such it is an issue that where the intersectionality of the things that led to people dealing with substance use is so wide. It is hugely wide. And so we are definitely sensitive to that. One of the other perspectives, if I could ask you to speak to, in that vein, is there are unfortunately people that are taking advantage of those that are dealing with substance use. And you talked about humanity for those that are dealing with the substance. What is your perspective or the admin's perspective from the legal perspective? Because there's been some, and I think rightfully so, people are saying like, yo, what about the folks that are going down there selling the drugs? They don't have an addiction. They're just going basically, perpetuating this addiction. And so if I could ask you to speak to that just a little bit.
Yeah. I think the communities that have had the most success in trying to address the circumstances, and Mass and Cass is definitely a larger scale issue, but it really does start with a human-centered approach and trying to meet people where they're at. But also when you need tough love, sometimes you need tough love. And so it's got to be that, sort of combined effort of providing services, developing trust, pushing in where you can, never giving up, but also accountability for the bad actions that might be happening. Yep. And that can sometimes be the pathway that certainly addresses the individuals you talked about who are taking advantage of others. Yep. And also might help, that family member, because that is who these individuals are. They are human beings to try again, another outlet, another pathway, an opportunity. But it really needs to be combined. This is not just having a law enforcement lens. It's not just having a nonprofit provider lens. It's that combination effort. And when people are working together, whether it's like a community impact unit, embedded in folks who are working on the ground to prevent homelessness, to address homelessness, I think that's when we have the most success. But it's not simple. No. And it's not like there's just a standard operating protocol, right? It does take that commitment to community with a value system that puts people first.
One of the things that is paramount, if we did have a standard operating protocol, what we use, I haven't heard SOP, and I used to work with Department of Labor, is you talked about the humanity piece. And one of the tenets of this platform is love. And what I say at the foundation is sometimes you have to love from a distance, and sometimes you have to implore tough love. And so to hear you say that, along with some other things, you've used the term pushing in services like 6 times. And so I'm perceiving that the administration's approach is to get those services in, and you've used that term a lot. So I just wanted to name that. One of the other things, and this isn't particularly in my wheelhouse, but in your role and in the administration's role, you have the responsibility to make sure that folks can get to work and get, to pick up their children and get to the grocery store and also get to and from the airport. What's going on with this? What's going on with this? Now, this is probably going to be one of the most candid parts. What's going on with the Summer Tunnel?
Jimmy, I live in Salem. I'm on the North Shore, and the Sumner Tunnel is going to be closed. Right now, the Sumner Tunnel is closed on weekends. Look, this is a piece of infrastructure that needs to be upgraded. You don't want this to be an emergency repair, a major tunnel. And so it's being planned to invest in it to make sure it's going to be able to serve us for the next 100 years. It's over 100 years old. But it means we do need to shut it down for 8 weeks. So from July 5th to August 31st, the Sumner Tunnel is going to be closed 7 days a week. And it's a major, arterial entryway into the city of Boston.
You can see in your face
Yeah, I know. We are trying, though, I will say, to, make lemonade out of lemons. And that means while the Sumner Tunnel's closed, we want to address the impacts that people are going to feel. So we've made the Blue Line free. We've reduced commuter rail. Let's get people on public transit. They'll have opportunities to take ferries at a reduced rate from Lynn, from Salem, from other locations, with the whole idea of like ditch the drive, like get out of your car. And this might be an opportunity for a mode shift, right? So many people now are, I think, they may not be working 5 days a week, so they may be driving in, or maybe the train schedule doesn't exactly line up the way they want. It's a little more inconvenient. Well, not having this roadway, like if you can get on public transportation or commuter rail and get used to it, like a mode shift, then maybe you won't go back in the fall. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible to put up with the inconvenience. It's going to be inconvenient. We know it's going to be impactful. How do we mitigate that? And maybe like do some good. It'll be less emissions, like body by MBTA, right? You're going to be taking more walking, more commuting. So ditch the drive, understand we're making an investment here, and maybe take advantage of taking public transit. That might be better for the planet as well.
There is an advantage there. But now, Lieutenant Governor, I perceive from you that you keep it real. You cannot mention the MBTA without Lieutenant Governor. Things are so interesting. So what's going on? The improvement, like where are things? I know there was some other report I think that came out from DOT. You mentioned the MBTA, so I have to just ask you about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a system at the MBTA. We are the first subway system in the country. Hello, that's wonderful. But there hasn't been the investments over the years, not casting blame at anyone who was just in office or anyone who was office 20 years ago. This is who we are. If we want these things to work, we need to invest in it as a community, as a society, and they haven't been the investments that have been made. So, I think we're excited about new leadership we have at the T. Yes. This is the first time in 8 years we'll have a real transit professional who's an engineer leading the agency, building a strong team of leaders so we can not only make the investments that we know we need to, but make sure we're doing it in a strategic way aimed at building that trust and confidence for people to get back to using the T who may have been using it before, and also recognize that how we think about public transportation is going to change now that people are working remotely. And that they have different options. And we want to think about transit-oriented development. How do we build housing near our T stations? How do we get that system working that's consistent, that's reliable, and most assuredly, that's safe? So that's our focus. Yeah. We're not running from the challenge, but I will tell you, it is a big one. Yeah. And so this is an opportunity, by the way, with this Sumner Tunnel to build back some of that trust. The Blue Line, the commuter rails, there'll be options. We've got some commuter ferries, as I mentioned. To try and prove that, we are a system that can work when one of our other transportation systems is under construction.
Absolutely. I wanted to end with, before the governor gets ready to come in, to get your thought. Today is, and forgive me, I think I put on the flyer and even in the title here, Friday, June 17th, but we are in the teens in June, and this is Juneteenth. Massachusetts has done a lot of firsts. Massachusetts, I believe it was the former administration, but was very quick to declare a federal state holiday on this coming Monday. And I think it was in 2021 when the legislation, it was the first year, I believe, or 22. But can you talk to me from your perspective about Juneteenth, the importance and relevance of it? What are you doing? And the other thing is they are forecasting so much rain.
I know. Franklin Park.
Yeah. I'm like Franklin and DJ D-Nice was supposed to be there, that kept us all in music during club quarantine during the pandemic. And so away from that, hopefully we can keep can you all put like a bubble over Massachusetts for no rain? I'm just saying.
It would be nice if we could.
Yeah, if you could do that, then folks will just say they did that, but they didn't fix it. No, so let me stop. But Juneteenth, from your perspective, Lieutenant Governor.
I'm a history minor in college with my degree, and I never learned about Juneteenth, right? I found out about Juneteenth 4 years ago when we celebrated in Salem. We had a flag raising. Nicole McLean, North Shore Juneteenth Association, she's now a city councilor in Lynn, really went around and educated our entire community around what this holiday is, what it meant, what this wasn't a holiday at the time, what this remembrance of history, why it was important. And I think it says something to me about like, what are we teaching? How are we teaching? I mean, the whole 1619 project, that was a big.
I got to meet the author yesterday, Nicole Hannah Jones. No
way. Yeah.
I'll put a picture up if you don't believe me, but go ahead.
Hello. I think there was a real, education turnaround for many of us who thought we were learning what we were supposed to learn. Like, read The Color of Law, Richard Rothstein. You'll talk about what was going on in housing in our lifetime, right? And so I am, I think excited that we are talking about Juneteenth, that we are recognizing Juneteenth, that we are celebrating Juneteenth, and I hope that we are learning lessons on how we can act going forward, tied to things like Juneteenth. So I'm planning to be at Franklin Park. We'll see if that works out with the weather. I know we'll have our own Juneteenth flag raising ceremony here. And the more that we can, relate and recognize and understand why we need to tell these stories, and break through what it wasn't correct history, or the whole history, and that Black history is American history. And that's the bottom line. So.
Okay, well, we'll leave that right there. With Juneteenth, and also I got a chance, and thank you so much for the few minutes that you and the governor spent with the members of Boston While Black at the parade last Saturday. It meant so much to them. There is the parade, the month of Pride. There's Juneteenth. There's Women's History Month. There's Latino Heritage Month. Can you talk about the importance of equity beyond days, beyond parades? How is the administration ensuring that equity exudes throughout its policies and in its people, as far as, positions and whatnot?
Yeah, I think we're really, I think, excited about the opportunity to make sure we're building a strong equity agenda and embedding that in the work. Some of that starts with the foundation of where are we at right now, whether it's boards or commissions, building a diverse cabinet, which we have. I mean, I think our cabinet is historically diverse. Having people around the table with those different lived experiences and perspectives makes us, I think, better policy leaders, better at governing. And the challenge is embedding that in the work going forward, and embedding that, and frankly, in the people who are around the table and the decision makers. And that's really important to us. And you can't know how you're doing unless you're tracking it. So a lot of that work right now is happening. Where are we at now? Where will we be at the end of 4 years, or at the end of whatever milestones we want to put in place? The governor is really leading this effort. It's very clear to anyone who's working in our administration that this is an important, not just a value that we talk about, but the one that we want to live and invest.
It's interesting because the governor actually made the announcement here, I believe it was in January, about the tracking system and some intentionality of specifically looking at what's in place and who's using it with this sort of equity lens. And then not shortly after, you all form the the Advisory Council for Black Economy. What tell me the
Black
name?
Empowerment Council, right?
Black Empowerment Council, yes.
Yep.
I'm sure April English and others are more heavily involved in that. Shout out to my sister April. But I wanted to ask about that in the context of Juneteenth, in the context of Pride and Women's History Month and whatnot, because I think we often do well at the days and at the parades and whatnot, but this equity is 365.
You got it.
Really is and sometimes 366 every 4 years. But I just really wanted to appreciate what I've heard from you today around just the authenticity of how you guys are approaching some of the hard issues, infrastructure, mass and cast. And then while we're waiting for the governor to come on, if I can keep you for a couple extra minutes,
of course.
One of my wheelhouses, or my particular wheelhouse, and where I've advocated the most, is in the space of violence, youth violence, gang violence. And yes, I like how you credited that Boston is a gateway city, but it's not just Boston. It's Chicopee, Springfield, it's Worcester. What is the administration's approach to attempting, yes, to address violence? And I've heard some of the addressing around the social determinants. We talked about housing and we talked about the economy, but can you just talk a little bit about what are some specific, not maybe specifics, but what is your or the administration's approach to working with issues around particularly gun and youth violence, but we know violence is domestic partner and things like that?
Really, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head when it comes to trying to make sure that we have safe communities, right? That's at the heart, right? That's just a foundation and fundamental. As a longtime mayor of a gateway city, we just felt it was important that we had one, trust amongst law enforcement and community members and regular communication, and two, activities, right? Young people in particular are really struggling right now. The CDC reports talk about youth and adolescents, this being the saddest generation of teens that we've had coming out of this pandemic, highest amounts of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. it's a real challenge that we have to confront and not run away from. Some of the work that we're doing are tied to mental health, I think is helpful in addressing some of the violence. And others are really those opportunities to provide resources to community members on the ground to develop programming and opportunities. We had, it was actually Governor Baker, their administration, that started summer nights. So resources to communities for what basketball leagues, the governor and I both played hoop in college, so we're partial to basketball.
But she said play hoop, yes.
Yep. But other opportunities, art therapies. I mean, we know there are lots of ways that young adults can be more active, particularly now. And if we have that connection, we also think that leads to both violence prevention and building safe and strong communities. So more resources for areas of that, more screening for behavioral health, looking at ways that we can connect young people to careers and opportunities for early college, and things that we know that give a foothold towards a strong future tend to also have connections to stronger communities. So resources, a lot of attention to some of the basics, and this isn't the state telling a community what to do. It's got to come from the community. Your rec department, what resources you might have and how to put them together better than the state ever will. So I think there's been a strong push to make sure we're getting dollars in places that can make a difference on the ground to hopefully prevent some of those activities from taking place and bringing people together in constructive ways.
That's one of the things that I was kind of impromptu, but I when we were talking about Master Cass and others, that I could not have you here and not talk and get your perspective from it as well. And I just wanted to send a shout out to DCR. I don't know if you saw, and if you're around, I'll send it to the team. But next Wednesday, we're taking over Carson Beach. And
Love it.
Java with Jimmy is going to the waterfront, and we're having a cookout on Carson Beach, Lieutenant Governor. So if you're free, please come through. I'll send the information over. And
definitely send it. I'm so pumped you're doing that. Our new DCR commissioner is Brian Arrigo. He's the former mayor of Revere.
Okay.
And he is getting after it, like all kinds of programming. We want to make sure we have amazing state parks, hiking, beaches, opportunities for people to get together. And we want programming and experiences there. There's something about being in nature. It's hard to not be happy, so we're pumped.
And we have, 47 miles of waterfront in Massachusetts to take advantage of. But as the governor is coming, some of those places, Lieutenant Governor, specifically, there was a recent incident in Revere. And I'm not talking about justifying some of the terrible, horrific actions of a young person with a gun, but Carson Beach last year was an issue. There was some black and brown young people there, Carson Beach in the 1970s. And so how, from your perspective of hearing that we're going to have a cookout there at Carson Beach next week, what's your response to that around diversity and inclusion on Boston's waterfront?
Yeah, pure joy. Amen. Having constructing activities, building opportunities for people to come together is key. And, there are flashpoints, and we should take them serious. These acts of violence are real and something that we are all concerned about. That doesn't mean we want to, put a gate in front of places that are open and available. The best thing we can do is have the sort of program space. So, thank you, Jimmy, for bringing people together, and in a way that's going to lead to fun and enjoyment and what you expect out of summer, and hopefully tamp down on the behavior that is not okay, right? We want people to come and be able to enjoy these spaces, not be fearful of what might happen.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Governor, I'm not going to hold you too long. I can carry it until our governor comes in. Look, I'm texting press right now. I'm like, where's the governor?
I'm going to go check on her. Where are you, Gov?
All right. Well, listen, within 2 seconds when she comes in, I know you went in and, hey, Jimmy's waiting. But no, I really appreciate the quick time I got to spend with you at Pride and also at the Icon Award. Thank you so much for coming in today. And thank you for being authentic and real as you are. And well, even just the mention of you getting ready to go. Here comes the governor.
All right.
So,
all right.
Governor, thank you so much. We have our governor here who is traveling from somewhere and is mobile. So we'll work with that. We'll attempt to work with that. Lieutenant Governor,
Jimmy.
thank you. Hey, how are you, Governor? Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Hi, LG.
Thank you, Jimmy. Hey, Gov, how's it going?
She is en route somewhere. Hopefully we'll get the signal to work out. But Lieutenant Governor, thank you.
I'm great. How are you?
We're
I'm all
doing
right.
good.
I'll see you soon. I'll take care, Jimmy. Take care. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you. Governor, we have you. I know you're en route, so the signal is a little interesting right now. I don't know if they can pull over and get you stable, so we can have a good interview. That would be awesome if they could pull over and do that real quick. But it's good to see you in the Java Cafe. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I have the opportunity today. I started off with Congresswoman Presley. I just finished with your good friend Kim, and now I have the opportunity to chat with you.
Great. Well, lucky me. I'm in great company. That's for sure.
So how are you doing? As I checked with you before when you were on, you are the governor. You are responsible. You're talking about infrastructure with the lieutenant governor and a lot of things that's going on. This is Pride Month, and while we celebrate, I saw a post the other day that said that Pride was actually a riot. And so I want to check in with you, just how you're doing, with all due respect, as Maura. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I really am doing well, and I continue to be really grateful for this job. I get to work with great people inside and outside of government. Pride was special this year for me, Jimmy, as governor, right? It's always special for me, but I just felt a lot of gratitude as I was running the parade the other day, and seeing all the joy and the celebration. It's great.
And we got to run into you, and I wanted to say, and I thank the lieutenant governor as well. I introduced you to some of the members of Boston While Black. I shared with you that one of the women, it was her coming out party, and she said what you said to her and affirmed and spoke with her just was so powerful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the introduction. And you mentioned that Pride was a riot. I do think it's really important that we not only celebrate, the joy of our LGBTQ plus community, but we also have to really commit, because there's hate out there. Even in Massachusetts, we've seen attacks on LGBTQ kids and people. There are over 500 bills proposed in other states, to ban the teaching of certain things, to ban access to healthcare, to that are anti-LGBTQ plus. And I just want people in Massachusetts to be super clear. We protect people's civil rights. We're going to continue to fight for access to healthcare and opportunity, and fight discrimination in all of its forms, So I also think of Pride as a recommitment to all of that, Jimmy.
Thank you. And that was thank you for getting me back on track, because that's why I mentioned about the riot piece. One of the things I want to jump into, because I know your time is short, is I just talked to the lieutenant governor, but there's no better person to hear it from than the person that's doing it. What was your philosophy in coming out so early with these pardons, Governor? This is so atypical, unique. What sparked you to do this?
Well, I guess a couple things. One, I come to this, remember, as a civil rights lawyer. I was head of the Civil Rights Division in the Attorney General's office. I was also Attorney General, the chief prosecutor for the state. So, I have a perspective on this, and it's very
just not clear. To make it too simple, but I do know what I'm doing. Gotcha.
Well, it's just to say I have a perspective where, we need to make sure that our system and our criminal justice system is fair and equitable. And, to me, justice delayed is justice denied. These recommendations were made to me by, I want to really thank our Office of Legal Counsel and also our Executive Office of Public Safety, who reviewed these. And, it was easy for me to make the recommendation for these individuals onto the Governor's Council, who I hope approves them. But, why am I going to wait? And I was asked yesterday, how many more of these could we expect? And I said, as many as justice requires, right? And,
yes,
I hope the people who, I recommended pardons for, it's like the typical story, right? They did something, they're involved in something, oftentimes when they were young. The result of that conviction is they have been kept from jobs, certain employments, certain professions.
Housing.
And housing, there are all sorts of consequences, and it's just really important that while we look to do a few things, support with resources, right? Support with resources and programming, especially for our young people, mental health services, you name it, right? We also got to, in the face of any, opportunity for greater justice, take advantage of that. And I'm not wasting any time.
I love how you said as many as justice requires. I mean, like listen, that right there, Governor, really, really stands out because it's so interesting that sometimes people get into positions of power, sometimes don't recognize their power, but then don't do the radical things. And so it is really, it's Congress woman Ayanna Pressley talked about. It was one of the first things that she mentioned in this sort of thing that she's doing at the federal level around criminal justice reform, the Housing First Act and whatnot. And so it is definitely something that's standing out to a lot. And a lot of people are in here saying as many as justice requires, end quote. Yes, Governor. Yes. One of the other things I wanted to check in with you about, we are in the teens in June. And though, we were talking with the lieutenant, the weather isn't so friendly. The forecast isn't so friendly toward us for tomorrow. We got to see and hug last year at the Juneteenth celebration in Franklin Park. I don't know what the weather's going to look like, but can you talk about Juneteenth from your perspective? Massachusetts was, I believe, one of the first states under, the prior administration, but you've done some very strategic things when it comes to the Black and Brown community, the Empowerment Task Force. When you were on early, you were talking about looking at the usage of BIPOC and Black and Brown folks of state services. Juneteenth, what is your perspective in 2023?
Well, I guess a few things. Happy Juneteenth to all. I hope everybody has a wonderful next several days. I look forward to raising the flag with the Black and Latino Caucus at the State House on Monday, of course. I guess a couple things, Jimmy. It's like we're 158 years from the time that enslaved people in Texas learned late that President Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And yet we live in a country, we live in a world, we live in a state where there are still significant disparities that are the result of systemic racism and discrimination. And we see those disparities: healthcare, housing, transportation, education, what's happening with the courts. And it's just, to me, a reminder that we've got to do everything we can to resolve that. As governor, I was proud to appoint an incredibly diverse cabinet. I think probably the most diverse in history. Leadership matters, right? Representation matters. My chief secretary, April English, is making sure that all of our boards and commissions and agencies, that we're getting recommendations for appointments from BIPOC communities, communities of color, LGBTQ plus communities, people with disabilities, you name it, right? That kind of diversity. I said at the outset I was going to do an equity assessment, and we've now engaged.
You announced it here.
Yeah, I announced it with you. And so, we're working with an outside entity to make sure that we are looking at, as you say, who's getting the services, who's getting the resources, right? It's not like an HR counting exercise of how many people of color we employ. It's about, we keep track of that too, but it's about who's getting what in terms of services, right? So that's an equity assessment. It's going to happen across all agencies. And my Black Empowerment Council and my Latino Empowerment Council are up and running. They've had meetings. I'm lucky that Tony Richards and Tanisha Sullivan are chairing my Black Empowerment Council meeting. And, what I said to them is, get out to communities around this state and then let me know what you hear and make recommendations. Give me the things that we need to operationalize and do. Really looking forward to the NAACP convention.
Yes, that's
coming.
Coming.
It's fantastic. We have a new housing secretary, and I announced the other day a climate bank that's going to provide a financial engine so that we have capital, private investment capital, coupled with state money to build more affordable housing and to center the work on environmental justice. So, we just got to try to move across all realms, when it comes to the work we're doing around equity. And, and again, I just want to bring people back. I love Juneteenth and getting out and seeing people at cookouts and barbecues and Franklin Park and, just the joy in that as well.
I asked Lieutenant Governor, with the forecast, I didn't know if, we've asked you all to pull off some miracles in government, but if you could, if it rains tomorrow, can we just quickly construct a dome and so we can over Franklin Park? I mean, just there, Governor, if you can pull that off, I mean, that's no small feat.
No, isn't the LG great?
Listen, she is amazing.
She is
I love
great.
her candor. I've got to chill with her a couple of times very briefly, and I'll be honest, when she came on today, I didn't know how it was going to go as far as, because she seems like the type that would say something and have me like, oh my goodness. And Governor's still in travel, so we're working.
I'm here. Hello.
Gotcha. And so I did really enjoy her, and she was very honest. She kept it real about things, even if it wasn't something that she would presume that people wanted to hear. At least they got authenticity. And so definitely, with all due, definitely a great choice, Governor Healy.
Well, we were lucky. I was lucky she got elected alongside me. And, I've always enjoyed working with her, but we work really, really closely. It's a true team approach. And, I think she's somebody who's like really authentic, really real, really, really smart. And, really interested in working to get things done, and make things happen. So
absolutely.
I'm really glad that you had a chance for more folks to come to know our great Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, they definitely enjoyed her. I know you're in travel, and it's sometimes in positions like yours, if you can get it just a few minutes to breathe. And so I'll end with this, Governor. We had the parade on Saturday. June is the month of Pride. I asked the Lieutenant Governor this as well. We have Women's History Month. We have Latino Heritage Month. How important is it that we move to equity beyond days and beyond parades?
It's absolutely imperative. These days are important. These months are important. They're an opportunity to take a beat and bring people together, right? But that work, Jimmy's got to be every day, right? Every single day, in ways large and small. We've got to be finding ways to take on equity, to take on injustice, deal with disparities, deal with inequalities. These aren't just like feel good proclamations, one and done. They have to be sustained, intentional, engaged effort, right? And it's hard, and it can be also painful. And you also see sometimes setbacks, which it's just, we can't have little middle school kids attacking other little middle school kids and staff for putting up pride flags and posters, right? So, obviously work to do every day, but that's how I see it,
Absolutely. Governor, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I was telling Valentina, and thank you, Valentina, for making this happen, because I told them, I said, I did not want you walking up on me talking about, Jimmy, when am I coming back? And I don't know. But Governor, thank you.
And Valentina's great, Jimmy. I shout out to Valentina on our team who's working hard to get me out. And I do want to apologize if I made you or anyone car sick, seasick with my bouncing around here. But I'm on the go.
Listen, but that's the thing, because if you weren't doing anything, and why is Governor Healy always in the media? And So listen, you're on the go. You're doing both things. Get it done. We appreciate you. Happy Pride Month to you. Happy Juneteenth. I hope I get to give you a burger, tomorrow, because we'll be grilling if we're out there. If we're out there, but Governor,
just bring an umbrella. Be all right.
I tell people often, Governor, you'll appreciate this. I said, if it rains, I don't want to melt. So, Governor, thank you. I appreciate you. And hopefully I will get to see you tomorrow, but sometime soon.
All right. Great, Jimmy. Be well.
All right.
Bye-bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye. So today, folks, we had our Congresswoman, our Lieutenant Governor, and our Governor. I'm going to sleep. It's been an incredible week. We're coming up on an incredible end of the month. Next Wednesday, we are gathering at Carson Beach and Moakley Park for Java with Jimmy on the waterfront. Cookout starts at, I got clarity. The cookout starts at 5. Cookout starts at 5. But the whole event starts at 3:00. We'll have family front activities at Moakley Park. And so, yes, that is taking place. And June gets ready to slow down. I made it. I very quickly, everyone that tuned in, that shared, yesterday from WGBH. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The pictures, I think, are on their way, and so I'll be posting some of those soon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all I have to say. I'm tired. I'm getting off of here and go recoup. Today is a real Friday, so we will see you maybe briefly on Monday. Actually, no. What did Dr. Brandy and I decide? We decided that, like we do on other federal holidays, we're going to treat Juneteenth the same. No programming on Monday the 19th. Tuesday the 20th will be Your Healthy Java. The 21st, we will have our panel with Boston Waterfront Coalition. And the 22nd, we'll have a regular show. And also, we will be live again from Boston Public Market on June 22nd. And so June is wrapping up. June is a very busy month in the Java Cafe, but we did it. We're doing it and we did it. So that's it for me. Happy Juneteenth, everyone. Stay tuned. Miss Teresa, thank you. Valentina, look, y'all, Valentina is in the building. She is in the governor's office, responsible for ensuring that the administration is intentional around working with of color and BIPOC and marginalized owned, or those that are typically marginalized owned media outlets. And so Valentina, thank you so much for making this happen. I'm tired, so I'm getting off of here. You all have a wonderful weekend. Again, happy Juneteenth. I will be in touch with the Urban League and find out. I joked with them. I said, I heard Saturday's canceled. Rassam was like, we didn't say that yet. So the forecast right now is for 90% chance of rain between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And when the governor said bring an umbrella, burger umbrella, nah, unless they have a big giant tent. And then, you know, you got to make sure that there's stuff on the ground that our feet aren't getting wet. I really hope that somebody just lift your hands and say, Lord, hold back the rain. I'm getting off of here. I'm tired. I'm starting to banter. Y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you. We will see you on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Have a great day, everybody. Peace.